and I'm ready. Set up my old PlayStation console and all my games are good to go to dive into some true nostalgia. Man, I spent hours playing these classics as a kid. And when I wasn't, I was taking the booklets to school with me and reading them at lunch breaks. You know, there's just nothing like it. Forgetting all your adult responsibilities and returning to a time of pure innocence. Man, I just can't wait until I finish reading the latest news on the internet. What? No! Whoa! Where are we going? Stop! No, come back! Don't leave me! Come back! They tried to warn us. They said this would happen. Why? Why did I listen to the alt-right? Gaming culture moves pretty fast, doesn't it? Annual sequel releases, hit trends always coming and going, someone finally utilises a console's full potential, and milliseconds later, next gen is announced. The closest thing to backwards compatibility we get anymore are re-releases of last-gen games that are barely 10 years old. And there's absolutely no time for a sincere apology or reparation for decades-long corporate abuse before they're right back to
Bonjour everybody, check out the new Assassin's Creed, totally different experience this year, you get to play as a white dude, we're inclusive blah.
Good lord, it feels as if half the community can only think of one thing at a time and there's never a long-term strategy in place. Just charging towards the future like lemmings. Not the rodents, the little green men.
Oh no!
However, when it comes to the other half of the community, there has been slow but steady progress towards safeguarding our games as they come. Outside of conventions, dedicated museums and libraries are becoming more established around the world. With the death of Flash in December 2020, there was a coordinated scramble to save as many games and cartoons as possible before they could no longer be played by anyone. Archive.org, Games That Weren't, and YouTube even, are just a handful of online catalogues for obscure and unreleased games that are completely free and open to the public. There can certainly be more work done, but at least there already is some love for gaming history to be found out there. So with all these other efforts at preservation going on, you may be wondering, why am I bothering with my own attempt? What has spurred this on for me personally? Yeah, that. The very people with the power to re-release these beloved classics to audiences old and new, memifying their obvious inability to care. Like, I understand the phrasing from everyone else, it's a time and place thing. But from the mouth of PlayStation specifically, it sounds so condescending. You just had to be there. That's the dick move that broke the camel's back. Unfortunately for myself, I am still learning to make games from scratch. I know nothing about ripping a disc and saving the code for the sake of archiving other people's games. But I do have a scanner. And for me growing up, to go shopping for a new game usually meant a road trip, an hour to and an hour from, so manuals were a godsend. I didn't have to wait till I got home, the experience began as soon as I opened the case. Introduction to the story, character biographies, some even laid out the worlds I'd be exploring in every level. And of course the artwork, whether it was in-game models or exclusively for the booklet. The colourful presentation and reading material were both plenty to keep me entertained and enough to get me excited for more. My millennial gamers testify! But over time, this pride came with a price. Back when I could afford to buy video games instead of food, trying to preserve my own collection became the bane of my existence. Scratches, cracks, broken hinges, pierced plastic, torn pages, sticker marks, watermarks, and writing. And in addition, I learned the hard way that some people on eBay didn't care at all about the integrity of what they were selling. Original case, my fat hairy ass. Needless to say, anything that survived all of that is now more in risk of cobwebs. Also, if you happen to have noticed the Caddicarus style in this video so far, that's because of his retrospective videos going through the old PlayStation demo discs and magazines. Something I can't do for how spread out and inconsistent my collection of the Australian version is compared to his British collection. Which really upsets me because compared to my superior age, Caddy is a baby.
No, I'm not being petty just because he's more popular than me. Shut up! But in all seriousness, what Caddy did with those videos, exploring larger trends of the industry, filtered through the fringe element of advertising, I hope to do similar via the artistic attitudes surrounding the games. Not just in the games themselves, but all the supplementary promotion one would receive after their purchase from EB Games. We don't have GameStop down here.
Prologue. What the hell have I gotten myself into?
Call me an idiot, but I actually knew the answer to that question before I started this, because I've been keeping track of everything I own for a very long time. Not just video games, but
DVDs, books, board games, specific toys and items. I have extensive lists of all of this on my computer, and I find peace of mind in the counting and sorting, so much so that I could become a librarian. Except that I don't have enough shelf space for all of it.
But again, that means I was fully aware from the beginning that this momentous task would encompass 457 physical game copies and all included material. It's a good thing I enjoy this stuff because I'm going to be one zen motherfucker.
Now, just like Caddicarus, a majority of the games I'll be looking through are indeed PlayStation, from the first console release in 1994 up to the PS4. Slowing down once my maturing opinions of the game industry stopped most of my spending on newer titles. I was a latecomer for the original Xbox and Sega Master System, but these were how my ex-partner spent her childhood. I bought them for her nostalgia, and for a while it was our Valentine's Day tradition for a new console each year. And I'm sorry to say, no early Nintendo at all. Blasphemer! Outside of that, everything is in the PAL region and legally acquired within Australia. I have nothing purchased from overseas, so no exclusives from Japan for example, but I also don't know about specific regional edits made when these were first brought into this country. I know that different countries means different cultures and so different standards for what is acceptable. It's not censorship, it's localization, and there is an art in itself knowing two independent cultures and how to transition one to the other. I mean, we all remember how much the English loves Metroid Other M, do we not? That's another reason I'm putting my foot forward here, to represent my slim demographic of the average working class gamer down under. Crikey!
If you happen to notice any significant changes from the version you have, please let me know via Facebook, Twitter or email. I'd love to hear and see exactly what is unique to my collection. But with no further ado, let's look into my video games. Ouch!
Part 1. The heyday of book play. For the earliest home consoles in the first and second generations, there was barely enough memory storage for an average-sized game experience, let alone a massive one. If development team wanted to flesh out unessential details like the story or controls, it all had to go into the booklet to clear as much space as possible. But as I hinted at before, I'll be skipping forward to Gens 3 and 5, as well as computer games that came after the discs transitioned from floppy to compact, but were still in these fragile jewel cases.
Which honestly demonstrates how bloody stupid it is for me to call myself a retro gamer. I can't even go back in time properly.
During this period of late 80s to mid 90s, the actual games were advancing enough to include tutorials in them, and so the booklets went from this necessary instructional fold-out sheet to the additional flourish for player enjoyment when not actually playing the game. The most impressive thing about these travel maps is how I even managed to scan them. As a matter of fact, Sonic got so impatient with this setup, his book ignored that tradition to use staples and have extra length. Insert size joke here. Okay, I know this is very biased, comparing anything PlayStation 1 to a console 2 gens older, instead of its own contemporaries like N64 or Sega Saturn. But you know, if anyone wants to collaborate, I'd be happy for a follow-up.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to show off the entirety of my collection throughout the years, because I was once a dumb child who fell for the trap of trade-in deals. Too young for nostalgia and zero foresight for exponential worth. Some of my rarest, such as Cool World or favourites like Ape Escape, are long gone, and I feel like a right knob when looking at how expensive they are today. Otherwise, a lot of these are my second or even third copies for one reason or another.
As an example, let's take a look at Rayman. I currently own one original Black Label and one Platinum version. I had the Platinum first and fully intended to permanently replace it, if not for the fact the manual had been extended for the occasion of selling its required 400,000 units within a year. Precisely to screw me over all these years later, I bet. At one point I had considered selling all my Platinums to buy the Black Labels for their higher value and scarcity. I'm sorry, I wanted a game collection, not a second place zebra.
This is bogus, man.
For the most part, Platinum is only a display of popularity and sales, and even removes the additional disc art that stops this happening in a scanner. Well, not really, but with this layout you've seen one, you've seen them all, so why did I bother? But now, with a single exception to the rule, what comes to mind is, how could I possibly know if there is a difference unless I have both versions of every game to compare? And that's why, thanks to this limbless bastard and his bastard overlords, I had to scan the entirety of this chunky boy twice over. Actually, why is it so big?
Hi, folks. Ya, minna. Salut à tous. Hallo Leute. Hey, I'm back.
Yes, this used to be a common practice where they would go through all the info several times over in different languages. Again, I wouldn't know if this was standard around America or Asia, but it's a no-brainer business strategy for a region as culturally dense and diverse as Europe, having the same layout printed en masse for multiple countries. But coming from a solo country that tries to push for multiculturalism, I can see a side advantage being for immigrant families who speak multiple languages getting to enjoy a game together, or even a student using these to learn. Why not?
Hello.
Montate la simpatica mariquita para huir de la reina. I don't know what I just said, but at least I gave the Spanish girl from Woolworths a good laugh.
As time went on, this format is largely dropped, which would drive me to ask if the modern solution is for every country to get their own translation, but as we'll see soon enough, that's not a pressing concern nowadays.
Oops, I didn't really think through the naming convention with these scans, did I? So Daniel has been Me Too'd, Reptar is very angry because it's his time of the month, and don't even get me started on Spyro, the dirty little. For the sake of journalistic integrity, I must make a confession. Nostalgia may have lied to me.
What?
I remember a lot of these being more colourful than this. To be fair, my memory isn't perfect at the best of times, but I remember a lot of these being more colourful than this. Maybe it was my pre-adolescent brain filling it in, maybe it's the aforementioned multiple purchases that screwed me over, but I still stand by what I said on the presentation here. It certainly takes a creative eye to make Grayscale 206, 204, 209 stand out from Grayscale 223, 220, 229. And just like the spice of life, this variety does make the overly vibrant examples more memorable, such as 40 Winks, Quack Attack, and Rayman 2. Oh, balls! The Abe's Odyssey booklet displays the entirety of Abe's moveset frame by frame, a testament to how smooth and detailed the animation was for a game in 1997, which in my opinion wipes the floor with the floppy fish physics of New and Tasty. Other standout techniques were in the writing, either playing up the gameplay by suggesting strategies, extra details for the story and universe, or going the extra mile to have the game's characters jump in for additional hints and gags.
Alright Dan, you've come a long way. I'd save if I was you.
Nah mate, you can't do that. Not without this nice and shiny memory card, only £200 from yours truly. Cure. For every tie-in game of a Disney movie, it's almost a guarantee that there's a couple of advertisements for PlayStation hardware. Almost as if Disney and Sony were, working together? Another commonality at the end of the booklets were blank pages, as a feature.
Genius.
Usually labelled as notes for the players to write down their own tricks and cheats, which I never used and just stored folded up papers I'd printed off medieval websites in the case. I guess with some of the more complicated puzzles in these games, it could be helpful to... Everyone, I found them! The one person who used these sections. They do exist! Ah, screw it all. When you find Bigfoot, you follow him into the woods, and when you get free cheats written in a manual, you do exactly what they tell you. Gee, thanks previous owner. Even the back of the cover was enticing, not just for showing and telling what the game was about, but very important information like age rating, how many players, memory card requirements, compatibility of analog and vibrators. Let's not forget that stickers exist, and as well as telling you that Australia gave this a G rating, they could put additional info onto the jewel case. So buying second hand, if this does happen to you, original case my fat hairy ass. Tough shit, you don't get the phone number for the official GT Interactive Software Games hotline. Ha 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 ha.
The number you have called is not available from this service.
Well, I didn't want it anyway. Moving on to PC now. In fact, my earliest exposure to video games in the computer labs during and after school hours. And I know that I picked up the bizarre idea of games are art from a very young age, but looking here I can't see it. Of course, from a studio that once would pride itself on hand-drawn animation, it feels off to find a manual this sparse. But you know, I am talking about a time before crunch culture extremes, so I'm letting this one slide. Blow me. I'm also very aware that the physical artistry for some older computer games didn't come in the manuals, but in the bigger boxes with extra pamphlets and goodies, which was a holdover from the floppy days. I still have a few of these remaining, but... oh Jesus, no, look at this shit. I really can't believe I flattened and cut them out for the sake of convenience in storage. Young me, you were a bastard. That's another reason I'm not looking into the magazine demo discs I have, because sadly I sliced through the cardboard sleeves of them as well. But that doesn't mean I don't have any unscathed demos to show off. I have a sampler disc from a McDonald's Happy Meal, and more impressively, 3 official catalogue discs sent directly to primary schools in the 90s. Now this is history, back when even our games were done by snail mail. It's probably because my mum used to be a teacher and I got the inside hookup that I have these, but when did I get them? Was I allowed to take them? Is it illegal for me to own them, not being a teacher myself? Is this guy a franchise character, or do I own his soul currently trapped inside the disc? Someone call Matt Pat. Matty Patty Cakes. Even to compare how distinct the 3 platforms are here, I find fascinating. Master System is obviously the most apart, but closer to VHS and DVD cases that the other 2 will eventually emulate. PlayStation includes a separate page for the cover, while PC has the manual sit in place to pull double duty. Sony and Sega felt the need to brand their respective cases so that there's no confusion over ownership, which makes the very existence of this case hilarious to me as a thing intentionally designed for Sega to share space peacefully with Nintendo. Or I'm just being obsessively pedantic at this point and need to move on. Part 2.
Still going.
So here we enter the biggest bulk of my collection, thanks to being an era flooded with third-party support, especially on PlayStation 2. Whoa! I'm going to bury the lead here by telling you that we'll be seeing a wider range of genres, styles and IPs, And I don't mean that as a good thing. To be fair, that's mostly because a large portion of these are party, sport and racing games that I merely inherited, which growing up as a Larry Loader normally aren't my area of expertise. But even for other genres, this was when the social element of home gaming was becoming ever more prominent. With the newly added DVD functionality bringing consoles to the family, earlier implementation of console internet, and who'da thunk it, even unity between platforms. They're little, but this is a rare sight indeed, case consistency across the board. Some colour coding, memory card holder on occasion, and special editions of course, but it's all the same sizing for cover and manuals. This is inspiring. It truly shows that we're all the same on the inside. On that note, manuals are no longer specified between originals and platinums, or classics for Xbox. So hooray, one print fits all. But that didn't help me one iota to relieve any of the multiple purchases. In fact, it was even worse with PS2 being cheaper on average. Here's an extreme for you. With iToy Play 3, I was so desperate to get an untarnished full colour edition of the manual, at one point I ended up with 5 copies in my possession. 2 I had to throw away because they were scratched to shithouse. And I no longer have the tarnished original, but must have had it in order to know a coloured version existed. So that's 6 individual copies of one game in total. Please take these away from me, they're clogging up my house. I've also had 4 Finding Nemos, 4 Madagascars, and an extra Ratchet & Clank 3 manual because I wrote in them as a stupid child and now I can't get rid of them all. This is my purgatory. For those who give a crap about maths and formulas, there's almost a measurable correlation for the most amazing booklets going alongside games that are very... This is 2 minutes into the game. And even though I have a greater sample size for PS2, I feel that Xbox has a better consistency of quality going for it. Wow, how'd you manage that, Billy?
He's always been pretty confrontational.
Yep, makes sense. On a similar sentiment, nope, bugger that. Oh bloody hell, we all know EA is shameless, but they put more love and energy into their own promotional booklet than the one for the game it came with. And honestly, I haven't even played any of these, so yeah, I'm gonna have to do this. Shit games for sale, fuck this heat. Well, maybe not that far, but I'm going to avoid forcing in references to every game so I don't take an hour to discuss and a decade to edit. I'll prioritize the good stuff from here on out. Regardless of even my definition of good, it seems. The irony of this box set is that for the brief time I did play World of Warcraft, the MMO built around cooperation and friendship, I never used or shared these guest codes. And it could be straight up illegal to scan these strategy guides, I don't know. But they are pretty big, so this is where I draw the line. Of course not before the 200-page mini-manual, my god! I would downsize this one as well, but for how far past this edition the online community has travelled, I doubt anyone would give enough shits to buy it from me. But oddly enough, even with the qualifier of just the good stuff, there's way too much here. Looking back, this era of gaming was a creativity gold rush. And admittedly, that's exactly what led to the amount of trash I just dumped. But we're not going to let that discredit the whole generation, are we? And thankfully, this experimenting applies just as much to the manuals. I confess to front-loading a lot into part 1, trying to cover the basic template they worked under, only to have nothing additional to say on those features 1 gen later. And as this production continues, I feel the need to call myself out for shit I said 10 minutes ago. But in their place, I have found a ton of effort during this run of the collection that encourages book use in tandem with gameplay. something I didn't see earlier, like the bus. Back to iToy Play 3, there's these coupons in the back that unlock extra video clips and features when you hold them up to the camera. Hey, this looks familiar, doesn't it? Jak and Daxter uses the same folding layout as the Sega games I looked at earlier in order to facilitate a world map on the other side. And the Grand Theft Autos also include maps outside of the game to be used as, well, actual maps instead of the GPS that mindlessly guides you from point to point without making you learn the landscapes. While the books are presented as in-universe magazines and tourism brochures to build the open world structure filling said landscapes. Machinarium contains an option to access the puzzle solutions by completing a minigame, but with the collector's edition you don't even need to play the oh shit, sorry, I forgot, I didn't mean it! Come to think of it, a number of special editions are very generous with their physical gifts in spite of being on the most digitally accessible platform PC. More of an addition to the edition, the Basement Collection throws in a young Edmund Macmillan art book, rather than a manual in the traditional sense, a lot of which was showcased in the included film.
But yeah, no, it was validating to find that box and see those things and be like, wow, like, this is just like the game.
This movie's so good, I hate it. In fact, could I just take a second to appreciate when booklets use a different cover from the box? I know it's a weird thing to praise, but think about it. Unless it's tying the booklet itself into the game's world, this wasn't necessary, but who cares? This may have been an alternate design they considered early on and chose not to throw in the bin. And I like that. A lot of behind the scenes effort just goes unnoticed. But these little choices to share more art with the audience means that it wasn't all wasted effort. But then some games go a little too far to bring the Manuel experience internally. Not a one-to-one translation and not the first examples, but filling the same role with all the added bells and whistles, that's most definitely impossible for printouts. This journal is Jiminy Cricket's record of your adventure. As Royal Chronicler, Jiminy takes an abundance of notes during the course of the game. Why would I bother with this shit? These are interesting variants on what physical media delivers that I can't argue against, but I'm still not the biggest fan of a permanent replacement. I know by now I'm sounding like an old wanker who can't enjoy anything new.
Oh boy, you just wait for the finale.
But these systems were more of a post-game feature for me, not wanting to repeatedly stop and start reading them throughout the game as they updated with my progress and changed massive chunks of text. Tied into collectibles was fine, but summaries of the story so far, while definitely helpful after a long break between play sessions, didn't entice me until after finishing the thing that it potentially could have helped me through.
Yeah, right.
Although, that's just me being foiled by my own idiosyncrasies.
Part 3. Handheld consoles. How am I supposed to win?
Alright, we've established the pattern now. How many games from PlayStation have we got this time? What, only 6? That was unexpected.
In context of this list, Nintendo is almost exclusively for portable gaming, and that doesn't say much since I never leave the house. So what do I need Sony for here? Spin-off, 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 port, remake, sequel. And look at this nonsense. We've got perfectly good miniature discs imprisoned in glass. So hypothetically, if you want to align the pictures correctly, it requires either more than 2 shakes or sticking finger grease all over the shiny side. But then again, I can't even tell what's up and what's down.
Can you?
So chronologically, we are now parallel to and yet outside of the console trends, taking influence from both the era we just finished looking at and the era yet to come. So I'll try not to spoil anything, as pointless as that may be. And it was predominantly the Nintendo DS that would try continuing the expansion of audience demographics. While my set doesn't really represent as such, without the plethora of female-focused products, pretending that I didn't get my junior ass handed to me by a girl back in Crash Bash, Here we can see a more intellectual path being taken, which immediately gets undermined by the history of marketing all this shit. Oh, that didn't age well. But hey, we all know Nintendo has always been the people's billion-dollar company, generously giving away pamphlets explaining the use and safety of the DS consoles free with every game. Firstly, shouldn't these ones be included with the damn consoles? And secondly, how many DS injuries have been reported? That shit's embarrassing, man, don't tell everyone. With a cursory mention that the limits and layouts required unique design for all console ports, it's actually fortunate that I didn't get too into portables and thus avoided duplication, because not only do we still have platinum labels, but also PSP Essentials now. Ooh, fancy! However, hoping to find an equivalent feature for the DS's successors, the closest would be Nintendo Selects, which feels very selective for some odd reason. So when it comes to telling customers about longevity and popularity outside of first-party IPs...
You're on your own, bitch.
Oh, what? I'm not allowed to defend the intention after hating the technique? Pfft, please. I'm complicated like that. A couple of games even extended their individuality to factor in the cases themselves, making me wonder if there were any other specially designed cases I may have overlooked before. But no, I am not restarting. Not many people know this, but the Professor Layton series rewards long-term players with a special code system between entries, unlockable in a hidden menu that has been protected for centuries by an unknown organization. Top secret, what's that? World Championship Poker, huh? I wonder why it's rated PG. No shit. Put a pin in that. Also, Deluxe Series, haha, I see what you did there. And I stumbled on a Club Penguin review that got me intrigued in its online community long after the official demise. So I bought the DS game with all these promotional pamphlets, and not the official book.
Fucking eBay, I never learn.
I also have Super Mario Bros. 3 for the Game Boy Advance. But I genuinely don't know where it came from.
So that's it for this section. Like I said, I'm not much of a traveller and I never got that into handheld.
Yes, I decided to steal my son's Elite Pad Ultimate to have a look at what the next gen of gamers are potentially exposed to the earliest. This thing that is never considered a gaming console, never sold with other games, often relegated to the children's toy section of other shops, can indeed be considered a gaming console, and I want to include it. What, you waiting for a punchline? I am here to celebrate the minuscule union of game art and printed media, so why can't I discuss those rare games that actively promote reading, and art, and maths? My qualifier for this not just being a regular tablet device for kiddies is the simple addition of a cartridge slot and the external availability of games. And said external games are available with their own artwork and books, so that gives us something to look at. If only I had more of them to look at. God damn it. But what games do we have here?
I don't know, something's off. I can't quite see. Oh, of course, because I forgot my glasses. Thank you, Scout. This was a big mistake.
Yeah, I needed to take a slightly different approach with these cartridges, as their special design to cater for smaller fingers actually gets in the way of scanning. I certainly can't fault it for this, but I do keep forgetting which way to insert. And I'm not even the target demographic.
You know what? Fine. You can call me an idiot, you can leave at this point, you can say this invalidates everything, but if I'm going to make the claim that all games are art and all games deserve preservation, then yes, that means everything. Part 4, Downward Shits. And so...